Welcome to the Archive Podcast, where we explore the arcs of our individual journeys and the strength of the hive that holds us together. I'm Amy Rost, and I believe that life isn't meant to be navigated alone. Here, we dive into conversations that bring us closer to ourselves, to each other, and to the communities that lift us up. This is a space for real stories, honest reflections, and meaningful connections. Whether you're in a season of transition, seeking deeper relationships, or simply craving conversations that inspire growth, the Hive is for you. Because when we come together, we are stronger. Welcome to the Archive Podcast. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? I am so excited to be here today, and I'm not in my usual space, so it's got me a little bit, a little discombobulated maybe, but 'tis the season. And it kind of goes with our theme today for today's conversation. And we're going to dive into the stories we tell ourselves and how do we rewrite them? Because this is a big topic. And I want us to really explore the narratives that we are carrying, the inner stories that shape how we see ourselves, what we believe we are capable of, and how we move through the world. And we all have, those little scripts in our heads, and those scripts and those thoughts, preconceived notions, they're not always true. And some of those scripts, some of them that you might have are, I'm not ready. I'm too much. I have to do it all alone. I'm not creative. I'm not brave. I'm not strong enough, whatever the word is. And any combination truly of these, we all have some of them. And let's be honest, none of us are walking around where none of those stories creep in. And I think what we have to remember is these stories that are in our head and that are patterns that come up along with them, they're not always true. And I want us to really explore what would happen if we could rewrite them. Take a breath. It's going to be okay. So, it's rewriting these stories is it is a hard thing to do. And I really want to honor that today is it is not easy. And a lot of these patterns and these stories have been with us for a long portion of our lives. And they really do begin to shape our reality. And so I really want to introduce the concept of these inner narratives and how they are unconsciously guiding us, guiding our choices and our reactions, and perhaps even our sense of self. And I think, the first question, and I have to ask myself this a lot, is what is story and what is truth? Because sometimes we just begin to believe the story. We've perhaps ruminated on a thought or a concept in our mind for so long that we believe it. And I think it's really important to define the difference between the objective truth and just the story and the layer of the story we have been telling ourselves. If we really explore those beliefs and how they form through repetition, they can form from being in an environment, they can come from trauma, they can come from different experiences, and even expectations that we put on ourselves or that we feel others put on us. And where this came up for me is when it was COVID, was putting on a national conference, and we were shut down like 5 weeks before the event was supposed to take place. And I really had that story in my head. I have to do it alone. and that I wasn't doing enough. And that story ruminated in my brain for a very long time. Like, okay, weeks, but in that time it felt like years. But it really began to, one, impact the decisions I was making around this event. Two, it really created a deeper dialogue that I was a victim. And three, it really limited my ability then to see what action and what could I control in that moment. And these stories we tell ourselves can very much hold us back. That inner narrative limits growth. It limits creativity, it limits our visibility, and it really impacts our confidence. And mindset, this is really part of this, is it affects everything we do, everything we touch in life, from being a wife, a mother, to a business owner, to a community member. All of those are impacted about the way we see ourselves. And when we see ourselves as perhaps not enough or not doing enough, um, and like I said, it starts to create other patterns that really actually ask us to retract and to, become really small. Not only do our thoughts kind of get small because we get hyper focused on these stories and telling them over and over, our world gets really small in being able to see the solution out. And it I always say, how we talk to ourselves, we should be talking to ourselves the most, in the most kindest way, most loving way we know how, rather than speaking to ourselves as the greatest critic. What would happen if we spoke to ourselves as the most loving, supportive, compassionate soul we knew, and we spoke to ourselves that way? What potentially could come from that? Because mindset just isn't writing out a mantra. I wish it was that easy. Mindset is a lifelong journey. It's a lifelong practice, and that we need to be mindful of how we talk to ourselves. And, you know, I think, as a parent, when you're, mindful of how you're talking to your kids, are we always still that same? Do we talk to ourselves that same way, or were we talked to that way? Those are all pieces that impact sort of that mindset and that dialogue that is really going on in our heads. And again, it is a practice. We don't and are not going to get it right every single time. I wish it were that easy. I hate to break it to you. This is a lifelong practice. But part of this practice is just the recognition, being able to discern, is this true? Is this not? Is this someone's opinion? Or is that really who I am? That even just that question really, interrupts the pattern, because it'd be like, hey, wait a minute. Is it really true that all my thoughts may not be truth? It is. They aren't all true. And again, with their many, many, many influences that perhaps have created that thought. And that's kind of the cool complexity of the human mind. And it's also maybe also a little bit of our downfall in, not being able to recognize the truth. So if we get to a point where we're like, we have a thought, we have story or a thought loop running through our head, and we realize we've asked ourselves, is this true? We've actually just got acknowledgement. How do we then begin to rewrite the story? And here's some tools about mindset, mind shift tools, really how to shift out of that. And there's not one way to do this. There are many ways, and I really challenge you to explore those ways for you. The one we've talked about is first is naming that story, that awareness. When we become aware of when we're telling ourselves that something is telling ourselves a story that is really disempowering, we pause. And that's the next one. We pause and reframe. We ask, is it true? Is it true? And if it's if it's not true, let's go a little deeper and get curious. What is the real truth here? And then I think it's also, as we reframe, how would I say this to my dearest friend? How would I speak to that friend in the most kind, loving, compassionate way? And then we do replace that. So we've paused, we've reframed, and now we are going to replace it with compassion. Use self-talk that sounds like belief, trust, and love. Replacing the thought with, for me, going back to the story of the Pilates Fest North being shut down, I really learned a lot about my self-talk in that moment. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have to do it alone, which wasn't true. And that I wasn't doing enough, which also wasn't true. And when I really was able to identify that those thoughts did not have the full truth in what I was telling myself, I could go a little deeper and say, okay, what is true? It does feel like I'm alone in this moment and I'm navigating these uncharted waters myself. It feels like I'm alone, but am I? Do I have someone I could call who could help me bounce ideas off? And when you start to deconstruct and peel back the layers, the feeling was true, but the thought was not. The thought that I had to do it alone wasn't actually true. Did I feel alone? 100%. But if I didn't have to do it alone, and I did have a network that I could call upon, that actually shifted me to be able to see a way out or an action forward. Seeing that difference also feels different, right? Being able to be like, it's okay, I felt alone in that moment. There was a lot of things going on and everyone was having a different experience, and that was okay. My second thought that I wasn't doing enough, that one was a little more complex, I'm not going to lie. To dive into that was, I was thinking, I was doing as many things as I possibly could think about. Who could I reach out to? Could we deliver something in the meantime? Who could I talk to today? I was doing a lot of the things, but I was doing a lot of the things that maybe didn't feel like I was moving the needle forward, or it may not have looked like from the outside I was doing a lot of things. Again, that was different. And then I really had to have a moment. I had a really good cry, and I had a moment of, I am doing enough. I am doing my best, and that is enough. And that mantra, I had to replace that anytime it came up, because what I was taking on a lot in that moment was others maybe thought I wasn't doing enough, or others thought I should be doing something different. And on top of that, the time we were in, there was so many of us that were, perhaps voicing concerns that actually were backed in just sheer fear. And when I started to peel away the layers of when I was getting a little bit of pushback or people were unhappy, um, or wanted a certain thing that we just couldn't deliver, I tried to see that with compassion. And then rewriting that statement for me was, I'm doing the best I can, and that was enough. It was enough. And when we replace that, when we replace that negative thought or that story that I'm telling myself, I start to come um, to my own self with much more belief in what I was doing, trusting that, my why was solid and that what I was doing was really in the name of love. And that, again, it is a practice that we continually have to go back and reflect on. It is not an easy practice. Sometimes for me, I have to actually physically write down the words, and then I have to kind of like I said, deconstruct and get curious is where does that come from? And then I have to actually physically cross it out and replace it with a new thought, phrase, and truth rather than a story. And I think, the time we are living in today, it is so easy for our stories to be influenced. We've got so much noise coming at us all the time. We have, access on social media, immediate text, you know, the boundaries are a little less solid in terms of access to someone, or not just access, but what we ourselves are consuming. And, we've kind of, gotten away from, instead of picking up the phone and having the conversation, gotten to where it's done and right in a short text message or in an email, where that becomes, um, there's a time and place for that for sure, but it becomes the access without the conversation allows us to fill in, and that's just human nature, filling in the story. And we don't have, without intentionally carving out really time that we're disconnected to really consider, is this true? For me, when I'm not doing this work, if I'm not kind of like clearing up some of these and I let those sort of thoughts really creep in, for me, they show up at 1 or 2 a.m. They will wake me up. Anyone else there? They'll wake me up. They will ruminate and play and play and play on this loop. And it's like, oh, and then as it plays on the loop, more and more is added to it. And again, it's not necessarily adding truth. And I think to be able to put into practice, and I'm talking like you need 3 to 5 minutes a day to do this. And whatever that outlet is for you, it could be while you're walking, it could be writing in a journal, it could be meditating, it could be moving, whatever it is for you, it's just being really intentional about, what keeps replaying. And as I look at what is replaying, how can I replace some of that with truth and not just let the stories in? As we live in this world where we can have access to people and information, and we see each other's lives, and that comparison piece is so easy to just creep into our life, is being able to actually ask, is it true? And it might even be a deeper question because I always ask, is it true? But then I go one step further. And is that true for me? And not true for what someone else says about me. Is it true for me? And that's all connected into that mindset work. And, you know, the journal prompt here is, so if you've got a journal, take it out. If you want to ponder this thought and come back to your journal later, please do. But I really do is to take a few moments and ask yourself, what story have you been telling yourself that no longer serves you? And be honest, because, you know, if we don't really look at ourselves in our truth, we aren't serving ourselves and we're not becoming our best selves and we're not growing and expanding if we don't look at those truths. And look, if today you can't look at the hardest truth, no problem. But what is a story you have been telling yourself that no longer serves you? Because usually we've got a few. And then I do want you to do a second part to this one. I do want you to say now, what is the new story you choose to write moving forward? This comes not only shifts mindset, this also becomes a little bit of manifestation. Look at the world will tell us over and over. If I say to myself, I'm not good enough, the world will show me a million examples of it. But if I shift that into say, I am doing the best I can and that's enough, the world starts to show me more examples of that. So I'm going to be mindful and I'm going to ask the universe to show me these positive things rather than keep me stuck in that mindset that is not serving me. You don't have to wait for someone else to rewrite your story. You hold the pen and you get to write this next chapter. So I really, hope that you'll take a moment and really dig into, what are those sort of like stories, those thoughts that are really on repeat for you in your life? What are the ones you hear yourself saying? And then I again, think about the most being the most kind, loving, and compassionate soul you could be, and being that person for yourself first. How would you suggest to that best friend who is you? You should be your own best friend first. How would you speak to them? You know, we sometimes get busy and maybe not super intentional and we're not really aware of how we are talking to ourselves and some of those thoughts that creep in and we're like we just kind of let it go, like pass by on to the next thing, but there are ones that creep in. And I think then again asking yourself, is it true? And then like if you're really looking to like go a little deeper into this mindset work, which like I said, it is a lifelong practice, but is like where did it come from? Because most of us are not born thinking we're not enough. Babies don't think that. That would be conditioned and brought in from different experiences, different types of parents, different interactions, trauma, all of those things. So if we go back to that, I'm rewriting this new chapter. How could I go back and be like, did I really discover that about myself? Or was that given to me? Okay. If it was given to me, is it true? Is it really true for me? Maybe, maybe not. And if it's not, how can I replace it? And this I do think is a practice that is powerful to see the words and write handwriting if that resonates with you. For me, very much. I love for me the power of paper, pen to paper really starts to make a lot of shifts for myself. So find that for you. And let's really together be mindful of this mindset. I invite you to choose that, as you start to see the thoughts, what's one new belief you could start to reinforce for yourself this week? What is one new belief that you come to yourself with such compassion, love, and kindness to see the best in yourself? What is the one thing? And how could that begin to change your life? You might be surprised. And as you do that, I hope, if you feel like you feel called to, I'd love for you to share on social media. Maybe this week we'll use the hashtag rewrite my arc and the archive. Um, and tag me and if it's not something you want to share publicly, but you want to feel free to put it in a DM and share with me, because I also think when we start sharing and being vulnerable about some of these patterns we have, putting words to it sounds scary, but I promise you 9 times out of 10, it isn't as bad as we thought it would be. We've again told ourselves a story and a narrative about the outcome instead of just showing up, making a change, and holding the space for a new outcome. And what would happen if it could be even better than we imagined? So sit with that. But thank you so much for being a part of the archive today. I hope this episode left you feeling inspired, connected, reminded that you are never alone on this journey. If this conversation resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your takeaways. Tag me on social media at arc.hive.podcast, and let's keep this hive buzzing. And don't forget, subscribe, leave us a review, and invite someone you care to join us on this journey. And until next time, keep honoring your arc, leaning into your hive, and showing up for yourself and your community, because we are better together. This is the Archive Podcast, and I'll see you soon.